you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give is true and correct, so help you God?
I do.
Have a seat in the witness chair. Go ahead, Ms. Hughes.
Thank you. Ma'am, can you please state and spell both your first and last name?
Kaladra Cookett, Kaladra Kochuyt,
And ma'am, how old are you?
42,
Where do you currently live? In what area?
Hardin County.
Who do you live with?
My husband,
How long have you been married to your husband?
almost 10 years.
In what area did you grow up?
Here,
When you say here, what do you mean?
Ottumwa.
Were you born in Ottumwa?
Yes,
And how long did you live here in Ottumwa?
till I was 10.
Then where did you live?
California,
And how long did you live in California for?
6 years.
Did you then return to the state of Iowa?
Yes,
And where did you return to?
my father's house
Where was that located?
on Ransom Street.
Is that also in Ottumwa, Iowa?
Yes,
So would it be, were you about 16 when you returned?
yes, it was August of 93.
Did you then continue to live in Ottumwa?
Yes,
Did you have any children when you were living in Ottumwa?
yes,
How many?
3.
What are their names?
Tyler, Kelsey, and Gabriel.
And were they all born here in Ottumwa?
Yes,
And who's the oldest child?
Tyler,
How old is Tyler currently?
25.
And then you indicated Kelsey.
Yes,
And how old is Kelsey?
24.
And what is Kelsey's last name?
Thomas.
Do you see Kelsie Thomas in court today?
Yes,
Could you please point to Kelsie Thomas and identify something she's wearing in court today?
gray sweater.
Your Honor, may the record reflect an in-court identification of the defendant by this witness.
The record will so reflect.
Thank you. And you indicated you have one more child after Kelsey?
Yes,
And what's that child's name?
Gabriel,
How old is Gabriel?
16.
You indicated you don't currently live in Ottumwa, correct?
No,
At what age did you move from Ottumwa to a different location?
I don't remember. It was May of 2010.
Why did you move to a different location?
I got married and we left this town.
How old were you? I'm sorry, how old was Kelsey when you moved to a different area in Iowa?
I don't even know right off the bat. Would have been 10 years ago.
How old is Kelsey now?
24.
So would it be fair to say she was around 14 years old?
Yes,
And if Kelsey was 14 when you moved, how old would Tyler have
15.
been? You indicated that you actually gave birth to Kelsey here in Ottumwa.
Yes,
And would it be fair to say that you lived in Ottumwa from when Kelsey was 1 until she was 14 and you moved away?
yes,
When you moved away, did Kelsey move with you?
no.
Why not?
She lived with her dad,
Who's Kelsey's dad?
Larry Matthews.
Does Larry Matthews still live here in Ottumwa?
As far as I know, yes.
Now, when you moved, did Kelsey have a phone?
Yes,
How was it that you and Kelsey would communicate?
we would text every day,
How far away were you living when you first moved away?
about 2 hours away.
Would you see Kelsey?
Yes,
How often would you see Kelsey?
about every other weekend.
What kinds of things, or I'm sorry, where would you see Kelsey?
I would come down and get her and take her up home.
And when you say up home, that's where you were living at the time?
Yes,
Once you moved away, did you have any family still living in Ottumwa other than Kelsey?
yes.
Who else lived in Ottumwa?
My mother, my father, my sister, pretty much my whole family.
Do those people all still live in Ottumwa?
Yes,
Did you ever come back to Ottumwa to visit?
yes.
And when you came back, what kinds of things would you come back for?
Like birthdays, holidays.
At the time that you moved, I know we determined that Kelsey was around 14 years old. Was she in school?
Yes.
What school was she going to?
Evans.
And is that a high school here in Ottumwa?
It's the middle school.
And then at some point, did Kelsey move on to high school?
Yes.
And where did she go to high school?
The Ottumwa High School.
Would you have come back for things like Kelsey's graduation or other school events?
Yes.
And you indicated that you would text almost every day.
Yes.
Would you talk on the phone as well?
Not every day, but close.
Were you with Kelsey when she thought that she might be pregnant?
Yes.
Where were you at with Kelsey?
I believe my mother's house.
Would that be your mother that was here in Ottumwa?
Yes.
How old was Kelsey when she first told you she thought she might be pregnant?
I believe 15.
Did you do anything when she told you that?
No.
Did you do anything to help her find out if she was in fact pregnant?
Yes, I bought the test.
And when you say bought the test, was that a pregnancy test?
Yes.
Were you there with her when she took the pregnancy test?
Yes.
And was Kelsey in fact pregnant?
Yes.
And at that time, where was she going to school at?
I believe the Ottumwa High School.
Did Kelsey then move from Ottumwa in with you?
Yes.
And at that time, where were you living?
I was living in Albion.
Did Kelsey actually enroll in high school in Albion?
Yeah, no, Conrad.
Did Kelsey live with you throughout her pregnancy?
Yes.
And was that the whole time she was pregnant?
Yes.
Did Kelsey actually give birth when she was around 16 years old?
Yes.
And did she have a daughter or a son?
A daughter.
And what was her daughter's name?
Chloe
And what's Chloe's last name?
Chandler.
Were you there when Chloe was born?
Yes.
What kind of relationship did you have with Chloe?
She was my world.
Did Kelsey first live with you when she had Chloe?
Yes.
For how long?
It was about 2 weeks.
Who else was living with you at the time?
My husband,
Was anybody else?
Chloe's dad,
And what was Chloe's dad's name?
Stephen Chandler.
You indicated that it was about 2 weeks that Chloe and Kelsey together lived with you after Chloe was born.
Yes.
Did you help take care of Chloe in that time?
In that short time, yes.
Did Kelsey and Chloe and Stephen at some point move out?
Yes.
Do you know why they moved out?
Because they didn't like a comment that my husband made.
Where did Kelsey go then after she moved out with Chloe?
Back down here to her dad's.
And when you say down here, do you mean Ottumwa?
Yes.
And when you say her dad's, is that who you indicated, Larry Matthews?
Yes.
When Kelsey moved in with Larry Matthews, did Stephen move in with her?
No.
Do you know if Kelsey and Stephen then broke up?
Yes.
And why did they break up?
I don't know.
At that point, once Kelsey and Chloe moved back here to Ottumwa, did you stay in contact with Kelsey?
After a couple months,
And so, just so that we're clear, after she moved back to Ottumwa, for a couple months, you guys didn't talk as much.
yes.
Then after that, did you start talking again?
Yes.
Would you say you talked on a regular basis?
Yes.
How often would you talk?
Almost every day.
What type of communication did you use?
We both had cell phones.
So would it be fair to say you text and talked on the phone?
Yes.
At that time, once Kelsey moved back to Ottumwa, was your family still in Ottumwa?
Yes.
Would you come back to Ottumwa
Yes.
to visit?
Yes.
Who would you say, would you come for the weekend, or would you go back home then?
I would come down on Friday and go back up home on Friday.
What kinds of things would you come to Ottumwa for?
Family, birthday parties, holidays.
And I think you indicated before your mother, father, and sister were all living here?
Yes.
Did you go to, did Kelsey enroll in high school again back here in Ottumwa?
Yes.
Did you go to her graduation?
Yes.
At that time, was Chloe at her graduation?
Yes.
Where was Chloe at during your graduation?
In my arms.
When you would come down and visit, would you spend time with Kelsey and Chloe?
A little bit, not as much as I wanted to.
What kind of things would you do?
Just mainly hang out at her house.
Throughout Chloe's life, did you ever do things like go on vacation with her?
No. We went camping.
When you went camping, did you do any other type of activities like that?
Just camping, fishing. We would go to Adventureland. I can't remember if she had went with us or not.
At the same time that Kelsey and Chloe were living here in Ottumwa, were your sons Tyler and Gabe also here?
Yes.
Would you ever come down and would you ever come down here to Ottumwa and then go back home with Gabe and Chloe?
Yes.
And why would you do that?
Just to have her for the weekend.
And then how would Chloe get back?
I would bring her back.
Throughout Chloe's life, did she ever have to have any procedure for her ears?
Yes.
What kind of procedure, did she have to have?
I think she had to have tubes in her ears.
Did you come down to Ottumwa for that?
Yes.
Throughout Chloe's life, would you ever talk to Chloe on the phone?
Yes.
And would you guys talk or FaceTime, or in what way would you communicate?
We would just talk on the phone.
Did you have a nickname for Chloe?
Yes.
What was your nickname?
Peanut.
And why did you call her that?
I started calling her that before Kelsey even gave birth to her.
Did Chloe have a nickname for you?
She would call me Peanut.
Now tell us a little bit about Chloe. What kind of things did she like to do?
She liked to go to the park and color and blow bubbles.
Did she have a favorite movie?
Yes.
What was it?
Frozen.
Did she have a favorite food?
Anything.
Did Chloe have a brother?
Yes.
And what's Chloe's brother's name?
Phoenix.
Do you know how old Chloe was when Phoenix was born?
Not quite 3, I believe.
Once Kelsey had Phoenix, let me take that back. Who was Phoenix's father?
Aaron Thomas.
And once Kelsey had Phoenix, where were they living?
I think she had an apartment at Stellar Woods.
So were they still in Ottumwa?
Yes.
At some point, they moved away for a few months, but then came back to Ottumwa?
Yes.
Did you maintain a relationship with both Kelsey, Chloe, and Phoenix?
Phoenix couldn't really talk, but yes, I talked to Kelsey and Chloe.
Did you notice anything different about, let me take that back. What was Chloe and Kelsey's relationship like? What did you observe?
Typical mother-daughter relationship.
After Phoenix was born, did you notice anything different?
Yes.
What did you notice?
That she didn't really pay very much attention to Chloe.
And what do you mean by that?
She paid more attention and did things for Phoenix.
Did you ever go to any parties or family parties after Phoenix was born?
Yes.
Did you make any particular observations that happened at any of those family parties?
Yes.
What did you observe?
We were at a birthday party at my niece's house, and nobody was paying attention to where Chloe was until we realized she was down by the pond.
And did that seem unusual to you?
Yes.
When was that birthday party? Do you remember when it was in relation to Chloe's death?
A month before that.
Did you ever make any observations about how Phoenix or Chloe were dressed? Anything about their clothes?
No.
Did you ever have any conversations with Kelsey about Chloe?
Yes.
What kind of things did you talk about relating to Chloe?
She would be having a hard time getting Chloe to listen. And I just told her to try to spend as much time as she could with her.
And why did you tell her that?
Because I thought maybe if she spent more time with her and paid more attention with her, that she would stop being a brat.
Did you ever have a conversation with Kelsey specifically about Chloe coming to live with you?
Yes.
When did that conversation take place?
Like a year prior to the...
So would that be about a year prior to Chloe's death?
Yes.
So approximately 2 or so years ago. And was that conversation in person or over the phone?
Over the phone.
What did Kelsey ask you during that conversation or say to you?
She pretty much told me to take Chloe.
And what was your response?
I said, no, you would miss her too much.
And why did you say that?
I would miss her.
When was the last time you saw Chloe prior to her death?
That birthday party.
Did you ever go with Chloe to the zoo?
Yes.
When was that in relation to her death?
May.
Would that be May 2018?
Yes.
So approximately 2 months before her death.
Yes.
Why did you go to the zoo?
It was my birthday, and that was my birthday present from Kelsey.
Who did you go to the zoo with?
It was me, Chloe, Kelsey, and Larry.
Was Chloe walking around that day?
Yes.
Did Chloe know how to tie her shoes?
Yes.
Do you know who taught her how to tie her shoes?
No.
Is there anything specifically you remember while you were walking around the zoo regarding her shoes?
That we had to keep tying them because she couldn't get them tied that tight.
Just one moment, Judge. That day when you were at the zoo with Chloe and Kelsey and Larry, how often would you say that Chloe had to stop and tie her shoes?
Every couple of minutes.
And would she let anybody else tie her shoes? But when she tied them herself, why was it that she had to keep tying her shoes?
Because she couldn't get them very tight.
Now, on July 19th, 2018, did you find out about Chloe's death?
Yes.
How did you find out about Chloe's death?
One of Kelsey's ex-boyfriends called me.
Around what time was it that you got a call about Chloe, from that boyfriend? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think it was a little after 8 o'clock.
On that day, did Kelsey try to reach out to you in any way?
No.
What did you do after you talked to that boyfriend, or ex-boyfriend, I apologize?
I called Kelsey.
And around what time was it that you called Kelsey?
It would have been between 8 and 8:30.
What, if anything, did Kelsey say?
I asked her what she was doing, and she said she was eating. And I said, how's Chloe? And she said, how did you find out?
And that was her response when you asked about Chloe.
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time I'm going to show a photo to Ms. Cookett. I believe that there's a stipulation between the parties as to the foundation, but I would just ask that based on that stipulation it be admitted into evidence and that I'd be allowed to publish it to the jury. I'm sorry, Judge, it's State's Exhibit number 1.
Any objection to State's Exhibit 1?
No, Your Honor.
State's Exhibit 1 is received and may be published to the jury.
Thank you, Your Honor. Kelly, I'm showing you People's Exhibit number 1. What is that a photograph of?
Chloe?
And that's Cloe Chandler.
Yes.
And is this what Chloe appeared like?
Yes.
And this looks like Chloe from when, prior to her death?
Yes.
I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Cross, Ms. Jensen.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Cookett, the truth of the matter is you have never had a good relationship with Kelsey.
Not always.
So she was essentially raised by her father, is that correct?
Yes.
And you would see her about 5 or 6 times a year until she turned 10 years old, is that right?
Yes.
And you were still living in Ottumwa during that time.
Yes.
I believe you just testified that you moved from Ottumwa when Kelsey was 14 years old, is that correct?
Yes.
And then after she turned 10, you saw her about every other weekend?
Yes.
Kelsey, the only time Kelsey ever lived with you was during her pregnancy with Chloe, is that correct?
Yes.
And then she moved out about 2 weeks after Chloe was born.
Yes.
After that, you would only see Kelsey on family get-togethers, so things like major holidays, about 5 or 6 times a year, is that right?
I would try to see her every other weekend when I came down to get her brother.
When you would come and pick up your son, considering that's a 10-hour drive, how long would you stay overall? Excuse me. Oh, yeah. Excuse me. So it's a 2.5-hour drive one way, is that correct?
Yes.
So how long would you stay in town when you would come and pick up your son?
Usually about an hour.
So not an extended period of time that you would be visiting with family?
No.
And only on a handful of those times you would visit with Kelsey? Because you said you would try to see her when you came, but that wasn't every time.
No, it wasn't.
So basically, other than those handful of occasions, you saw each other on major holidays.
Yes.
With regard to this conversation you had with Kelsey, where Kelsey asked you to take Chloe, you had indicated Chloe was 3 years old at the time. Is that correct?
Yes.
So that would have been 2 years prior to Chloe passing away.
Yes.
And that conversation didn't go any further, did it?
No.
So you didn't make any plans, other than that conversation with her, you didn't formulate any plans or put that into action in any way?
No.
And she never had another conversation with you ever again asking you to take Chloe?
No.
You also mentioned that you had seen Chloe in May at the zoo for your birthday, is that correct?
Yes.
And at that point in time, Chloe wasn't able to tie her shoes tight enough to stay tied?
Yes.
And it was 2 months later that Chloe passed away?
Yes.
No one from law enforcement had reached out to you yet by the time you went down to the station, is that correct?
No.
You came here on your own volition and spoke with them?
Yes.
Something you had mentioned to Ms. Hughes is that Kelsey didn't pay much attention to Chloe. These observations would have been the 5 or 6 times you spent together at family holidays, is that right?
Yes.
And Phoenix was 2 years old at the time?
Yes.
Would you agree that just naturally a 2-year-old requires more attention than a 5-year-old would?
To a point, yes.
I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Redirect.
Ms. Cook, I just have one question for you. Chloe died when she was 5, correct?
Almost 6, yes.
And I know that you don't know exact dates, but this conversation with Kelsey asking you to take Chloe, that was approximately a year prior to her death.
Yes.
Nothing further.
Recross.
Thank you, Your Honor. Okay, Ms. Cook, I want to be sure that I understand you correctly, because it's my understanding Chloe passed away, as you said, when she was nearly 6 years old. Is that correct?
Yes.
For a court order. And I want to make sure I heard you correctly, but did you just indicate that that conversation you had with Kelsey would have been a year prior to Chloe's passing?
Yes.
Do you remember taking a deposition with me on May 21st of 2019?
Yes.
And on that occasion, you were put under oath and sworn to tell the truth.
Yes.
So I'm going to be referring to page 13, line 17, continuing on through page 14. May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
Okay, Ms. Cook, and I'm going to read to you a few questions and answers here. I'll get close enough to you so you can read along.
Your Honor, objection and proper impeachment at this point. I believe she first needs to refresh the witness's recollection before she tries to impeach.
Sustain.
I'll return, Your Honor. Well, if I can do that. Ms. Cook, I'm going to have you read here, if you want to review this line. Page 13, line 17, all the way through page 14, line 3. Can you review that for me?
Yes, it would have. I see what you're saying.
Does that refresh your recollection?
Yes.
And so would Chloe have been about 3 years old at the time you had that conversation with Kelsey?
Three going on 4, somewhere around there, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Honor. I have nothing further.
Anything else for this witness?
No, Your Honor.
You may step down. May this witness be excused.
Yes, Your Honor.
You may also be excused and leave the courtroom if you choose to do so.
Your Honor, this time the state called Brittany Johnson.
Step forward, please. Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give is true and correct, so help you God? I do. Have a seat in the witness chair. Go ahead, Ms. Hughes.
Thank you. Ma'am, can you please state and spell your first and last name?
Brittany Johnson, Brittney, last name John.
And ma'am, how old are you?
30,
In what area do you currently live?
Fort Dodge, Iowa.
How long have you lived in Fort Dodge, Iowa?
Approximately a year and a half.
Do you have any children?
3.
How old are your children?
They are 5, 7, and 13.
Are you currently employed?
Yes.
What do you do for a living?
I manage a sanitation company.
Or how long have you been doing it for?
I have been doing that off and on for the last 11 years.
Prior to that, what type of employment did you have?
Held a few different positions. I worked at the sheriff's department, and then I went back to sanitation.
When you say you worked at the sheriff's department, where did you work at the
I
sheriff's?
was a correctional officer for the Wapello County Jail, and I worked for the Sheriff's Reserve
And where were you born and raised?
here in Ottumwa.
How old were you when you moved to Fort Dodge?
28.
And who is your mom?
Melissa Houston.
And are you related to Callie Cookett?
Yes,
And how are you related to
she's
Callie?
my aunt.
And are you related to Kelsie Thomas?
Yes,
How are you related to Kelsie Thomas?
she's my cousin.
What kind of relationship did you have with Kelsie Thomas?
We grew up together, played together as kids. When we started having children and moving into careers, our lives went into different directions, and we were no longer as close as we used to be.
How often would you see Kelsie?
Maybe 10 times a year or more, holidays, family functions, cookouts, things of that nature.
Did you ever have any interaction with her children?
Yes.
And in what capacity did you interact with them?
Birthday parties, Christmas, getting the kids cake, getting their plates made, helping them open gifts. The normal interactions, same kind of interactions that I have with my own children. They're small, so they need more attention.
Did you ever talk to Kelsie specifically about her daughter, Chloe?
I would say yes. Maybe Chloe needed a plate at Thanksgiving dinner, and I had noticed that she had not been served, but the other children had been. Or maybe Chloe was doing something normal that normal kids get in trouble. So, hey, can we get that toy, or things of that nature.
Did you ever see Kelsie interact with her son, Phoenix?
Yes.
Was there anything specifically that you noticed when she interacted with both Chloe and Phoenix?
Yes. Her interactions changed when Phoenix came. Phoenix was given ample amounts of attention. He was always clothed nicely, always received more gifts, made sure his plates were made. There was a big difference between the interaction of the two children once Phoenix was born.
Did you know Chloe's father, Stephen?
Yes.
Do you know why Kelsie and Stephen broke up?
I think there was a lot of issues with their relationship. They had a child young. I believe Stephen had affairs, lots of arguments, things of that nature.
Back in July 2018, did you find out about what happened, or did you find out about Chloe's death?
Yes.
How did you initially hear about that, or about something that happened?
At that time I was traveling for work, and I had got home in the afternoon. I usually don't get on the news or social media. I try to go straight to bed, but that morning I didn't. I couldn't sleep. I got on social media, and I found a news article with a picture of the residence, and that there had been a child's death.
And did you recognize that resident?
Yes.
And who did you know lived in that residence?
I knew that Kelsie lived in that residence with her children.
What did you do after you first learned that information?
I started calling my family. Nobody would answer the phone. Thought there was probably an issue with that. Why wasn't I notified? Why would no one be answering the phone at this time about something so serious?
So where were you at? Were you in Fort Dodge, or were you here in Temple?
I was here in Ottumwa at that time.
And what did you do then after you couldn't get a hold of anybody?
I finally was able to get a hold of my aunt. She told me that she had heard also through an estranged boyfriend and had contacted Kelsey, and it was in fact the case, which I immediately had a problem with. And in my pajamas, I drove to the police station.
Why did you drive to the police station?
Because of the interaction that I had experienced between her and her child once her second child was born. And as a mother of 3 daughters, if my daughter was deceased, my mother and my entire family would be aware, and I would not be able to function. And this wasn't what was going on.
Did you go to the Atonement Police Department?
Yes.
And did you talk to officers?
Yes.
And did you suggest anything to them?
Yes. They weren't willing to give me a lot of information, clearly, because it was still an investigation, even though it was reported an accident. And I did not believe that it was an accident after I had watched what was transpired, so I asked to be wired.
I'm just gonna stop you, sorry.
Okay.
After you spoke to them, did you decide, or did you ask them if you could wear a wire or a device to
Yes, I
talk to
did.
Kelsey? And was that your idea?
Yes, that was my idea.
And were you then, did the police in any way persuade you to do that?
Never, not at any point.
Were you then equipped with some type of audio and some type of videos equipment so that you could go talk to Kelsey?
Yes,
Did you then in fact go talk with Kelsey?
yes.
There did you go after leaving the police station?
I went straight to her residence.
And who was there when you got there?
Herself, her husband, and a friend of theirs,
And when you say her husband, do you know her husband's name?
Aaron.
And where was Aaron and Kelsey and this friend when you arrived?
They were outside hanging out,
What did you observe about Kelsey at that time?
that she was not upset.
Did you then proceed to have a conversation with those individuals?
Yes.
Did you stay then at that residence or did you go somewhere else?
I did stay at that residence. I asked where Phoenix, her other child, was, and asked to be taken to Phoenix so that I could take care of him.
And did you and Chloe come to the agreement that you were going to watch Phoenix for a day or two while they took care of things?
Kelsey and I did come to the agreement that I would take care of Phoenix while she took care of things.
Did you and Kelsey then go anywhere?
We drove to a residence, which I believe was a friend of hers that had Phoenix at that time.
And on your way to pick up Phoenix, was it just you and Kelsey in the car?
Yes,
And did you guys talk about what had happened the day before on July 19th, 2018?
yes,
Specifically, did you and Kelsey talk about Chloe and her behavior prior to her death?
yes.
And what did Kelsey tell you?
She explained things that were odd, that Chloe reminded her of her father, that she would get out of hand, that she would make her upset, things that a grieving mother wouldn't normally, in my opinion, express.
Did she tell you anything about Chloe's attitude?
That she was not very controllable, that she got on her nerves, things of that nature.
And during that conversation, did she say anything to you about how it was sometimes hard to look at Chloe because she looked like Steven?
Yes, she said that she could not look at her because she reminded her of her father.
During that, did you then arrive somewhere where you actually picked up Phoenix?
Yes, we arrived at the residence that Phoenix was being kept.
Did you and Kelsey then take Phoenix with you?
Yes.
Where did you go after that?
We went back to the house,
While you were
Kelsey's
on your
house.
I'm sorry. While you were on your way back to the house in the car, was it you, Kelsey, and Phoenix?
Yes,
Did you continue to talk about what happened the day previously with Chloe?
yes.
Did you ask her what had happened?
I did ask her how
What did
the...
Kelsey tell you?
She said that she must have accidentally hung herself, and she proceeded to explain how she thought it happened. But during that time, I had asked to enter the residence once we had parked, And she told me that she wouldn't go back in because she had just watched her daughter die.
And then did she then, after she said that, then say, well, not really die, but I found her?
She did. She corrected herself.
Did you, during that conversation, did you talk about the fact that the police were investigating what had happened?
I did.
And what, if anything, did Kelsey say regarding that?
That she thought she was going to be okay.
Did she give you any indication about whether or not she was happy that the police were investigating what happened?
No, she was not happy that the police were investigating what was happening.
Did she specifically talk to you about whether or not Chloe had ever done anything like this before, like tied anything around her neck or say anything regarding that?
I do not believe so.
Did you specifically ask Kelsey how the pants were?
I did.
And what did she tell you?
That she had tied them into a knot up above the rod, creating a loop almost like a swing.
Now, throughout your conversation with Chloe, with Kelsey, did you ask her if anyone else was home?
Yes,
And what did she say to you?
that there was no one else home.
Did she tell you who was in the house when this happened?
Just herself and Phoenix
And Chloe.
and Chloe.
Did you specifically ask her if she heard anything?
Yes,
And what did she say?
that she heard nothing.
Did you ask Kelsey why she didn't call anyone? And tell them about what happened?
I think I have. I did. I can't exactly give you the exact response. I think it was something along the lines of she was scared for people to find out.
Did she tell you that? Did she tell you anything regarding calling the ambulance?
I did. I asked her when she called the ambulance, and if she had called them first, and she couldn't give me a timeline, but yes, that she had called them first.
Did she tell you? Oh, I'm sorry, I'll take that back. Throughout your conversation with Kelsey that day, your several conversations, was she talking to you a lot about social media?
I don't recall.
Did you in fact take Phoenix then
I did.
and watch him for a couple of days?
I did.
And you knew Phoenix pretty well.
Yes.
And in fact, in your conversation with Kelsey, she even said he knows you and he'll feel comfortable with you.
Correct.
How long did Phoenix stay with you for?
I think I had Phoenix for approximately 2 to 3 days before they showed up and took him back from me.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
Cross, Ms. Jensen.
Your Honor, Ms. Johnson, you found out about Chloe's death on Facebook the morning after Chloe passed away, July 20th, is that right?
Correct.
And the account that you saw on Facebook, you had just mentioned it was reported as an accident.
I believe that's what it said.
You first tried calling Kelsey, your mom, Kelsey's mom, your grandma, and you couldn't get in touch with any of those people, could you?
I can't tell you exactly what order I called in, but yes, I couldn't get in touch with anyone right away, no.
You did end up eventually being able to get in touch with Callie, is that correct?
Correct.
So when you testified earlier, that Ms. Thomas had said she was not worried about law enforcement or an investigation, that's because that was actually in response to the question that you had asked her. Are you concerned about law enforcement or an investigation? And she said no.
I believe she said no, but when you asked about the detective calling and turning up the heat, I wasn't talking with Kelsey at that time. I was with Kelsey's husband at that time. So maybe I'm confusing the two incidents that you're asking about.
Regardless, of what time it is. Her response to you was that no, she was not concerned about any type of
Correct.
investigation. And that's because you asked the question, Ms. Thomas. She didn't elicit that on her own.
Correct.
Thank you. I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Redirect.
No, Your Honor.
You may step down. May this witness be excused.
Yes, Your Honor.
You may also be excused.
Just some vomit by her face and in her hair on the bed, and then the child. Other than that, I don't believe anything else was on the bed.
Did you ask what the child's name was?
I asked her what the child's name was, yes.
And did you learn any information about what was, at that point, what was alleged to happen to the child?
That she was just found hanging in the closet.
After you observed the child on the bed, what did you do?
I moved, after checking for a pulse and if she was breathing, I believe I moved the patient to the floor where I felt the patient's extremities to see if they were cold or cool, which would be an indication whether to not start life-saving measures.
Now, when you first checked Chloe for her pulse and breathing, could you find a pulse?
There was no pulse and her airway was obstructed with vomit.
And at that time, could you tell whether or not she was breathing?
She was not breathing.
You indicated that then at that point you moved her to the floor.
I did.
Why did you move her to the floor?
For a more stable platform to perform CPR on a bed, the person's going to bounce as you do chest compression. The bed's going to take up some of those compressions. So I moved her to the floor to a more stable platform to be able to perform chest compressions.
And I think a moment ago that you said that you started to check her extremities.
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
When we don't know how long the person or patient's been down, we check their extremities. That's kind of a sign on how long they've been without life or their heart hasn't been beating. The patient's extremities was cool to the touch. In my experience and training, that would mean that if it was an adult, me personally, I wouldn't have began life-saving measures due to the amount of time had surpassed that life-saving measures would have been viable.
When you say cool to the touch, and you specifically indicated the extremities, do you mean the legs and the arms?
Yes, the legs and the arms.
In your training and experience, what does it mean when you touch someone's legs or arms and they are cool to the touch?
It means that there hasn't been blood circulating through those extremities for an amount of time, basically the blood has had time to cool off. Since your extremities are exposed and and have air flowing around them, they're going to cool off faster than your torso, where you have all your organs keeping the blood warm.
And so in your training and experience, do your extremities cool before your torso or the center part of your body?
They do.
And when you touched Chloe's legs and arms, were they in fact cool to the touch?
They were.
Did you also touch her torso?
I did.
And what did you observe?
Her torso was still warm to the touch.
Now, did you then perform life-saving measures?
I did. At that time, I began CPR. All this happens within a matter of a minute or seconds that all this happens.
I think a moment ago you said if it was an adult, would you still have performed life-saving measures?
Looking back on it, no, I wouldn't have.
Why not?
Just because I know the amount of time would have surpassed that any life-saving measures would have been unsuccessful.
Did you observe anything while you were, or prior to, when you say performing life-saving measures, what do you mean?
CPR.
And prior to performing CPR, did you do anything regarding Chloe's mouth?
I did. I moved her head off to the side to clear the vomit from her airway before I started chest compressions.
And prior to putting Chloe on the floor, you didn't notice any vomit on the floor?
No, there was not.
What if, when those items, did they actually come out of Chloe's mouth then when she was on the floor?
Yes.
And did you make any observations of it?
I did. It was in, a ravioli, spaghetti-o type, substance. For me having small kids, that's what we feed them, so.
And when you say performing CPR, can you just briefly explain what you mean by that to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury?
So CPR is cardiopulmonary resuscitation. Basically, you've probably all seen it. It was chest compressions is what I was doing while I was waiting my crew of firefighters to come from Station 2. So I began chest compressions after I quickly cleared her airway. So I was pushing on her chest for probably a minute or two before the other firefighters got there.
Now, while you were performing CPR on Chloe, did you make any observations around her neck?
I did. I noticed ligature marks around her neck, or what I believe to be ligature marks.
At that point, and I know this is very quickly, did you at that point notice any additional injuries?
I did not.
How long did it take for paramedics to arrive?
I would say less than 5 minutes. The other firefighters that arrived brought in the AED that we applied to Chloe, and they suctioned her airway and began giving her rescue breaths with a bag valve mask, basically a machine, or not a machine, a manual bag that we ventilate the patient with.
And you said they brought in an AED?
An AED, yes.
What's that?
Automated external defibrillator. It's something that shocks, basically what you see, that it would shock the heart rate.
Did the paramedics initially that were to work on Chloe, they were on the floor?
The paramedics that arrived in the ambulance stayed in the ambulance. When the police officers let me know that the ambulance was there, I picked up Chloe and we carried Chloe and the AED to the ambulance where we could begin working on her in the ambulance.
And then at some point did the paramedics or the ambulance drive Chloe to the hospital?
They did.
Did anyone else arrive, or who else arrived when you were outside, if you recall?
There was a male subject that arrived, opened the back of the ambulance, and seemed to be very upset. I don't know who that was. I can't assume who it was.
I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Cross? Mr. Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. Chief Deputy Binge, how long have you worked for the Tacoma Police or Tacoma Fire Department?
Since April 1st, 2003, so going on 17 years.
Okay. And would it be safe to assume that this particular call that you responded to was not the first time that you responded to an emergency call for medical service?
No, it's quite often.
Okay. Not the first time that you responded to a 911 call similar to this and found somebody deceased?
No, happens quite often.
Okay. When you observed Kelsie Thomas at her home that day, your report notes that she appeared frantic to you?
She did. She appeared to me to be upset.
And all of that, you and I had a discussion in your deposition, was all consistent with what you would have expected under the circumstances, a mom calling 911, frantically concerned about the safety of her daughter.
Objection, Judge, is to refer to the deposition. The appropriate way is for counsel to ask the question today, and then if he needs to ask about the deposition, he can.
Sustained? You may rephrase.
Deputy Chief Binge, I had asked you a question about the female appearing frantic, correct?
Correct.
And that was your observation of her?
Yeah, she was acting frantic, yes.
And was there anything about Kelsie Thomas's demeanor as you observed her that would seem out of sorts or out of the ordinary for the type of situation you were responding to?
That it was not.
Now, in this case, you also offered a pre-hospital care report. Would that be consistent with your normal duties in responding to a situation like this?
Yeah, if I'm involved in the call and do something before the firefighters get there, I will author that section of the report to explain what I did before the other firefighters got there.
Okay. And earlier in your testimony, you were discussing how when you observed Cloe Chandler, her extremities were cool to the touch, but her torso was warm. Is that correct?
That is correct.
In your report, you note that the patient's skin was blue and her color began to become more pink as CPR continued. Do you recall that?
I do recall that.
Is that not an indication of some life still being in her?
What that indication was that our CPR was perfusing blood and moving that blood throughout her body. So, I mean, that meant the CPR that we were doing was quality CPR, and we, by us pressing on her chest and doing the CPR, we were moving the blood throughout her body.
Okay. And that CPR, again, was life-saving measures that were taken upon Chloe And all of that would have happened, obviously, before she went to the hospital and before she was pronounced deceased, correct?
That's correct.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Redirect?
Nothing based on that, Your Honor.
You may sit down. May this witness be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may also excuse and leave the courtroom if you choose to do so.